Hi, I'm Kyle with DIY Auto Homeschool, and today we need to put brakes on the back end of this '05 Accord. Last video we put out not too long ago, we put a wheel bearing on the back end of this. Noticed the brakes weren't looking too hot, so picked up some brake parts, and here we are today to put the brakes on. Now, if this is something you need to do, stick around. We'll walk you through it. First step, get the car jacked up and supported on jack stand. If you're doing this all by hand without the benefit of an impact, prior to lifting this up, you want to go in and break these lug nuts loose with your breaker bar or tire iron. We've got an impact, so when you get a wheel like this that's kind of stuck and it doesn't want to come off, what you can do, take a lug nut, just thread it on, not all the way down, just a few threads, and that way when this comes loose, if it comes off hard or wants to fall, this lug nut will keep it there. Just stand up with your back to the vehicle and give it a couple good solid kicks, or one good solid kick. Then we'll take that lug nut back off, set it with the others, and pull the wheel off. And getting down to the brakes here, this side doesn't look like it's quite as worn. Rotors looks a little off-colored here and there, but it's not as bad as the other side is. And the other side you can see in the other video where we did the wheel bearing. But what I want to show you is we don't have these screws that are typically right here. They're not here. If you get these and they're stuck in there, they're, we'll say Phillips, but they're really not. It's really not a Phillips on these. It's a different thing that's basically a Phillips. You take an impact driver and it's basically a mechanical tool that works like an impact. You put it on there, you hold it, you smack it with a hammer, and it pushes in and turns it at the same time. And that'll almost always get those loose for you. And then once you've got those screws loose and out, if it's needed, you can go in these holes and you can jack it off of the hub. These holes are supposed to be, at one time they were threaded, and they will basically just press it off of the hub. But usually if you hit these in between here, and I'll show you when we get to it, with a hammer or an extension so you don't lay these threads over, that'll work. If you run into a situation where these screws don't want to come out and you mess it all up, or you start to mess it up, you can go with either a small little pointed punch or chisel, or punch with a pointed tip, and put a divot in it, and then just, you know, make a divot straight in it, and then just try to work it in a circle and get it moving. Worst case scenario, take a big, like a 1/2 inch drill bit that's real sharp, and just dead center and just drill. It'll go right into that taper, and you'll cut the head off of it, and then when you pull it out, you'll have those studs there. You get vice grips, pull those off, whatever. Usually, it's been a long time since I've ever had to do anything like that, but usually you get them off pretty well with an impact driver or little punch or chisel bit on an air hammer. But we don't have to worry about that today, because these are long gone. Because once you pull them off, you don't have to put them back on. There's no need for it. The rotor is secured between the wheel and the hub. The wheel's put on, lug nuts on. There's no absolute need for them to be there. So now that I've gone way too deep on that, let's look at next. Next step, we're going to be pulling the caliper off, and then we're going to pull the caliper bracket off, and then we're going to pull the rotor off. So let's get back here and get a look at the caliper. This bolt right here at the top of the caliper, because this is the caliper and this is the caliper bracket, and these are the pins. This bolt right here and this bolt down here, I think you can see, are the two that we're going to be taking out. Now we'll have to hold this still this hex on the back side of this, because this is the slide pin that it goes into. Hold that still, and the same on the bottom side to break these loose. So this right here is 17, fit it on there, and then a 14 millimeter for this socket, or for this fastener there, and we'll see if we can squeeze the impact up in here. I'd usually be right where you're at, but you're there, so I can't be. So that one worked pretty well. So that screws out. Then we'll take off this bottom one. 17 on there. Pull that out. Now the caliper should be able to come off, and you may have to take a flat blade screwdriver and just work it a little bit, but it'll come right up and off. And you've got this control arm set here, and the back of this knuckle, so you can set it there without stressing the brake cable, and we'll deal with the hardware in there and getting that turned back in here in a minute. But next we've got the pads, and the pads should not be this difficult to come out. They should slide out. There we go. And I don't mind about putting that screwdriver in there and prying against the surface, because these rotors are going to get replaced anyway. Now there's quite a bit of meat left on that, but the other thing you see, it's not horrible, but it is starting to get a little bit of a taper on that pad surface. So we need to check these slides to see if that one's a little more resistance, but neither one of them are really bad. We're going to pull this bracket off. We're going to pull the hardware off. We're going to clean the bracket up. We're going to get new hardware on here. And then we'll get the pads and everything put back together, get these pins cleaned up, get this turned back in, cleaned up, and back together. This is not a horribly difficult job. These should be 17, I think. Okay, so no, those aren't 17s. Those are actually also 14s. So we'll use the same socket, and I need to get that unstuck. There you go. Oh goodness. So we'll use the same socket to go back in here and pull this bracket off. Alright, there we go. So now that bracket will come right off, and we'll go get this prepped and ready. But first, we have some unfinished business with the rotor. So instead of swinging a hammer and hitting these possibly, I got this big drift basically we use here. And that will break it free, just like if you were hitting it with a hammer. Now, let's go finish up the bracket. So, now what we've got is our bracket here, and we're gonna take this bracket and throw it in the vise. And a lot of times what you run into is you run into a situation where one of these pins is stuck or won't move, or has a bunch of corrosion in it. Now what leads to that is when these boots are torn or ripped. These boots don't look like they're in bad shape. They're dusty, but that's because they live on a dirt road. They're gonna be dusty. And this hardware that comes on there, you want to take this off, and you want, like, always want to replace this. If you get a set of pads that doesn't come with hardware, you can pick this hardware up for like 10 bucks. Always replace it. And underneath here is where you really start to run into problems, because this surface here will get rusty and get corrosion built up on there. And then this hardware that sits on it, as that corrosion comes in here, it starts to lift this hardware up, you know, jack it up, as the corrosion builds, and it squeezes the pads really tight, and then the pads can't move. When you put the pads in here, the problem you want to have is you want to have where the pads just want to slide out, want to fall out while you're trying to put it in. If they can slide that easy, then they're exactly how they're supposed to be. So let's get this cleaned up, get these, make sure they're good and re-greased and ready to go back together. Now, do be careful. Don't, when you go in here and try to clean these up, don't tear this rubber boot. So if this plane where you're cleaning comes out and runs over the edge of this rubber boot, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and pull this off first. They're really suctioned on there. They got a lip on that bolt, and that lip right there, can you see it? Focus, yeah. That little lip at the top of this pin is where that boot slide clips onto. It kind of fits around. So we can actually take this out of the way, and we don't want to get this, you know, filled with stuff because it's pretty clean in there, but we will clean it out. And what you can do, especially if you've got some rust built up, is they make a file for it, and I need to get one, but I've got this file right here, and I'm sure people will hate me for using a file like this, but go in here and hit flat on there. But these, actually, you can use one of these flat ones because you've got the access to it. Any rust that's built up, you won't usually get off with a wire brush or even the wire wheels on Dotco or anything. That rust is on there and so thick and hard, you'll basically just polish it. It'll shine up. And I know shouldn't be using this two directions, but I'm sorry, that's just what I do. So there's not really any, there's some pitting there, but there's not really any build up from that surface. So we'll give it some more scrubbing. Sorry, I'm blocking your view there. Get that cleaned up. Now, a good set of brake pads is going to come with this hardware, so you shouldn't have to worry about it if you're getting yourself a good set of brake pads. Problem is, sometimes people don't get good sets of brake pads. And some of these are going to come with different options. You can kind of look at what came off and what's going on. See, that looks a little bit wider. And that looks about right. That looks like it's the same width, but it doesn't have the same clip on there. Well, it looks like this is what we're going to use because this looks like it is what's going to fit. So you'll want to see how this fits in here. You know, it's got this lip that'll follow the contours of it. And what you can do is take some of your brake lube, and some, not tons, but just a little bit, and spread it. You can use your brush or whatever. A very thin layer. Now this will help even on this, and I try not to put a lot of this stuff on cars that live on dirt roads. That'll help keep corrosion and rust from building up behind there. What we don't want to do especially on a car that lives on a dirt road, is go put a bunch of that on top of here. You put a bunch of that on top of here, it's just going to collect the dust. It's going to turn into like a gritty paste, and it's just going to start to wear away, eat through the hardware, and that's not what we want to do. We want to make this last as long as we can. So we'll put a little bit in underneath it where it's supposed to sit and keep it from corroding, and then we are going to take the pin right here. We're going to clean the pin off, and we're going to see if we can change the angle of this a little bit so that we can get some brake clean to clean out of there. That'll clean that out. Any dirt or corrosion, or not corrosion because it had grease in there. Any dirt or particulates that might be stuck down in there, that'll clean that out. Now when you clamp this, try not to clamp it on this surface where it meets up to that knuckle at, because you don't want to mess up that surface where it sits flat. Now this pin, which is clean, and that bore, which is clean, and this boot, which if you look at the inside is still clean. There is some dirt on the outside edge, but that is sealed, and that dirt's not going to get down in there. Put a little bit on there, spread it out, and then some on the end. And then we'll take that pin and feed it back in. And if you kind of turn it and move it, it'll keep air from getting trapped down below it. And make sure you clip it back on to that groove. And then feel it slide nice and easy. Spins nice and easy. Let's try to clean off some of this because we don't want to leave a bunch of moisture on there that's just going to rust. And let's do the other side. Well, goodness. Okay, so now we're going to put the pads on. Now, the way these pads go, for these, you've got one that has a squealer on it and one that doesn't, and that's one for each side. Now, the way you want to look at this is these pads are supposed to go, and you will find people say all different things. What I've always gone with is they go on the inboard pad on the leading edge. Now, saying as if you were viewing this, if it was on the vehicle, you'd be looking from this side. So this is the inboard pad, and since the wheel is typically rotating like this, you'll want to have it down here on the bottom. So you'll want the pad, and this is the right one for this case, that goes in here and slides nice and easy back and forth on that new hardware, and have the squealer on the bottom, because like I said, this would be the back side, this would be the front side. When you're driving down the road, the wheel is rotating this way, so this is your leading edge, and then this will be on the sit down in there. on the outside edge. Oh goodness, see, this is what I was talking about. When you've got these cleaned and installed appropriately, these pads will just want to fall right out. That's how easily you want them to be able to slide. Watch me fidget with this. Okay, so we've got those in there. These are good. These are good. These pads, you know, they slide. This is on the inboard side, leading edge. Now this is done. Let's go get the caliper ready. So I came back out here to get the caliper ready, and I got the tool set up on it to turn the caliper back in, and it felt real rough and it didn't feel good. Wouldn't turn. Gosh, so I got looking at it, and the boot from sometime previously had been pushed up out of the way, and it's just got all sorts of rust and corrosion on this, on the piston back behind the boot. Can't put that back in. I can't turn that back in and just pretend like it's not there. So we're gonna need to grab a caliper. I'm gonna go grab a caliper real quick. We're gonna throw it on this, and then you guys are also gonna get to see how to replace a caliper, which is super easy at this point. So I'm gonna run up and grab that. Be right back. Okay, so this is the other side of the vehicle, and I just wanted to show you real quick what this tool does, how this works. This is the piston, and this is the tool that goes in, and it just sits in those grooves, has two tabs. They make a little cube tool that can do the same thing with an extension on a ratchet. This is what I use. I like this. But you turn it, and if you see, it turns that piston all the way back in, and I'm just turning this by hand until it stops. And so that is how you retract those pistons back into the bore. And you see that boot folded up nice and easy, not like the other side where you could see it was folded up, but it kind of folded in on itself nice and easy. The other side was messed up. So that's how that tool works. It goes in here on these grooves and turns that piston back in because it doesn't push straight back in. Like I said, they make a little cube that goes on the end of an extension to work on all sorts of different ones. But this is the set I use. Works really well. So let's hop back over to the other side and get that caliper put in. Okay, so we've got the caliper, but because we just have to, we're going to pull these apart. We're going to pull the caliper off of the bracket. The only one they had was the bracketed caliper. So we've got a new bracket here with this. So we're going to make sure that these are, because I'll tell you, sometimes these aren't greased. We're just going to make sure these actually aren't even the same pins. They are greased, but not a whole lot. So we'll make sure that we've got enough on there. But you can tell these pins are different. I don't think it'll cause an issue. It's just like a minor annoyance. That's where they seem to put all the grease. I don't know, you can kind of tell they put a trail of grease down there and there. But we'll make sure we got enough on there. Then we'll grab the hardware and pads, and I'm going to go ahead and clip these on here. Those clip on there, and what we're going to face with this, because you run into this with these aftermarket ones, is they fit so loose they don't even not just slide around, they don't even stay in there. They actually slide back and forth. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to take the new rotor, put it on, put this on, put the pads on, this is opened up, and then we'll slide it down. Okay, so this is the caliper in the vehicle, and what we need to do is we need to get this parking brake cable off and there is this clip, a retaining clip, that slides down over it here in the back. And what I'm going to try to do is see if I can get that off. Now, seeing if I can get that off and showing you may be very nearly impossible, but we'll see. Oh, here we go. Awesome. So that clip comes up and out, and then we should be able to turn and remove this cable. Let me get a different position. Okay, now I might be able to do this. Alright, I got that. Sorry, I bumped the camera a couple times. I got it kind of broken free. So now I'm going to try to pull back on this cable and pull it out. There we go. That's what we needed. And now we can pull it off of that arm. And now what we have left is this. This is the hydraulic cable that goes there. I'm going to spray this because I want this cable, or sorry, hose, clean. So it's probably loud for you guys. I want the hose clean when it comes off and apart, and we got new washers and a new bolt to go onto the new caliper. Alright, this is one of the things that frustrates me. This is a 12 millimeter, and that's what's going to go on that to loosen up that bolt, right? This is an 11 millimeter. It does not go on there, but it is what we need to do this bolt on the new one. It's just a little frustration, like why they can't keep the same bolt sizes, but here we go. Now, and I went and put the wrong socket on there, even after I said something. So, what we want to do is we want to do this quickly. We want to, in a quick fashion, pull this bolt off, break the washer free, or if there's washer stuck to the hose, we'll break it off. But then we want to put this new bolt with a washer through the hose, and this on the other side, and back into the new caliper rather quickly, because that way we don't really lose a bunch of brake fluid, and we can limit our time bleeding. So there's that. We're gonna spray that off. Then this is gonna sit above here, and it's already leaking. We got our new bolt and the washer, and our new washer underneath. And we'll switch out. We'll crush that down, but that's tight enough to keep it from leaking for the time being. So, let's get that brake fluid off, because we don't want it to start eating at the paint coating they got on here. Now, to tighten this down right, it'll have to be mounted so we got something good to go against, but I'm just going to snug it down a little bit so know for sure that it won't be leaking anything. And we want to mount this brake cable back on, but it's going to be very difficult to try to do with it just hanging free, so we'll wait till we got that mounted, and then we'll apply it, or put it on. So next step is we're going to grab the rotor, get it prepped to go on, and we'll start this off with the rotor on backwards, right? So I tend to do this, it's just kind of a habit I made. Put it on backwards so I can just let it sit there and wipe off the cosmoline, which is the rust inhibitor, that they put on there. You just don't want it to get it built up in the pads. So then I'll turn it around, and we don't have those bolts, but it's still not a bad idea to line the bolts, the holes where the bolt would go up with the holes the bolt would go into, just, you know, because then we'll ah, goodness, spraying the camera. That can't be good for it. Alright, now what we can do, since we don't have those bolts, but we'd like this rotor to stay down, is just take a lug nut and run it down until it holds the rotor in place. We'll take the brake bracket, or the caliper bracket, and we'll set it in place, and we'll start both of these bolts in the back. If I can see. Alright, so let's get this moved out of the way because we need to tighten those down. Alright, get that, still got some of that red fuzzies on there, get those off, move this back out of the way, and then we're going to take our pads. Remember, this one with no squealer is the outside pad, and this one with the squealer on the leading edge. And you know, when this show you when you're rolling forward, this is how that's going to be turning. That is the leading edge down there. Now the caliper, which is turned all the way out, they come that way, should sit nice and easily over this. What we will have to do is actually have it at the right height, make sure these pins are pushed in so they can slide on the other side of that, and there'll be some resistance because of that bracket that's right there. It wants to push down on the pads to kind of help hold them. So we'll just push that there in place, get one bolt started, then get the other bolt started. Alright, sorry I blocked your view there a bit. Let's give that a last spray, make sure there's nothing left there. Now that this is more rigidly mounted, we can take this parking brake cable, and let me make sure you guys can see that. Take this parking brake cable and we can pull down and put it through its hole. Then make sure it slides up through there. Turn it till it indexes in there, just like that. And then we'll take that clip And, well, what I have handy looks like a hammer, acts like a hammer. Sure, it's a hammer. And lock it in there. And then this, you'll feel those washers crush, and you don't want to go all He-Man on it and break anything, but you want it good and tight, and you'll feel them crush underneath the turning, and then it's good. Now this slides back and forth, the little extra room that it has, and what we've got left is to take our bleeder loose. And we're going to let the bleeder sit there until it starts to have a little bit of fluid come out. You see that? Once that starts to come and it has a decent steady drip, that means we're bled. So we'll take the lug nut off. Put the wheel on. Start all of these by hand here. Alright, now we just lightly snug those down. That noise, that's not uncommon. That's just the new pad sitting against the rotor. What we'll do is we'll go ahead, take this off the jack stands, put this down on the ground, and then actually, let's go ahead and get this off the jack stands and down on the ground. Alright, well the brakes are together. Gonna have to try to piece together a video out of this because I ran into the snag with the caliper not working, and then I tried to show you guys on the other side. Then we had to put the new caliper in, trying to get it bled, gravity bled. So I've got to go torque the lug nuts down. Make sure you don't forget that step if you're doing this, and make sure you don't forget to pump that brake pedal up before you put this thing in drive or take it out of park or go to take off down the road. So hope you guys got through this job with no snags, unlike me, and I will see you guys in the next video.